Hello friends, dear companions of Patriots, it's me Vinicius from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and today I would like to talk about the last events that are taking place in Brazil. So, first of all, I would like to talk about Alejandro de Moraes, also known as Xandão, that is the former president of the Brazilian Supreme Court, and the last events were very decisive for his future. What happens is that Alejandro de Moraes he was chosen to be part of the Supreme Court of Brazil by Michel Temer, that was a president that only reached power after the impeachment of the former president Dilma Rousseff. So there was a leftist president called Dilma. She was impeached by a very contested process, okay? Very controversial, but legal one. And in her place, her vice president, Michel Temer, took power. Michel Temer, he picked Alejandro de Moraes, who was already known for being extremely authoritarian, and he was the guy that solved the problems no matter what. So once Alejandro de Moraes reached power, only to give an example, there was one specific case that in which a politician was being judged for his speeches because one congressman advocated for the rape of other congressmen. And Alejandro de Moraes was the final vote that decided that that congressman had freedom of speech to say whatever he wanted. And he couldn't lose his political rights only because he said something like that. Very strangely, this was an opinion that was in the books that Alejandro de Moraes had. So it was consistent with his ideology, with his mindset. What happens is that this politician that was not condemned, thanks for Alejandro's vote, later he became president. And as president, he became a very big problem for the Supreme Court. Let's not forget that in 2018, when the former far-right president was elected, there was already a lot of people complaining that Brazil was under the control of the Supreme Court and that no president could rule over Brazil without dealing with the extreme powers of the Supreme Court. So, only to clarify, Brazil, since 2013, had a lot of protests. These protests culminated in the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff in 2016. From 2016 to 2018, Michel Temer replaced her. And in 2018, there was the election of the far-right president. Brazil became extremely radicalized, extremely polarized, extremely extremist. And I will not lie, there was one good thing about this rise of the far-right in Brazil, that was the fight against corruption. So a lot of people thought, no, this time it will be different. I will not lie. I know that every time that you see a populist leader saying, oh, I don't need to negotiate with the institutions, I will deal only with the people. This is the same formula that I saw before with Fujimori in Peru, with Hugo Chavez. It was doomed to fail since from the start, but the people wanted to believe, so they believed in something that was doomed to fail. So in 2018, the former far-right president reached power, rose to power. It was a disaster. He was extremely popular. We have to say that. First, he lost a part of, for example, all the impeachment process happened because there was a lot of corruption accusations against the leftists in an operation called Lava Jato, car wash. And there was a judge called Sérgio Moro, and this judge was one of the main judges that was prosecuting the corruption case of the left. And when the far right rose to power, they picked this politician. The problem is that when this judge became the minister or the secretary of justice, he wanted to investigate the corruption that happened in Brazil. But as the far right had a lot of problems of corruption themselves, at some moment it became unsustainable, and they had the president at the time, the far right president, he decided to fire Sergio Moro. So there was and then also there was the pandemic crisis. They were anti-science. They were totally against vaccines, and after almost 1 million deaths and all the incompetence of the government, the far right that was extremely popular in 2018, they became extremely not extremely, but it became a contested election, and they decided to push for some narratives against the Supreme Court and against the institutions of the government, against democracy. So there was a risk of self coup, and I think that the supporters of the far right, they thought that they could intimidate the Congress and the Supreme Court to favor what the president wanted, and they failed 100%, because the Supreme Court president was Alexandre Moraes, who was a person that was extremely authoritarian, just as I said before, and he took all the measures possible. He is not a guy that acts with the book, no. He is he made a lot of things that we could label as illegal, but it was even labeled as militant democracy. It is a concept that when a democracy, when it's seen that the democracy is facing a risk, the only democratic constitutions decided to act in their own survival. Okay, so there is this concept that when you have a populist leader that wants to use democracy to overturn democracy, so the institutions will try to act in self-preservation. And we see this democratical militance concept impersonated in Alejandro de Moraes. He became extremely authoritarian, arresting a lot of supporters of the far right. He decided to do a lot of things that were labeled as censorship, as authoritarianism, arresting people. So it was authoritarian, but it was labeled, seen at the time as, oh, it is in a good, with good intentions, because he wants to preserve the Brazilian democracy. No, so in the beginning, only the far right was criticizing Alejandro. So it's ironical that he was chosen for to be Supreme Court justice by a conservative person, and in the beginning he was seen as a very conservative and Catholic guy, and the left hated him. But after he acted against the far right, he became a darling of the left. And a lot of leftists saw his he made a kind of sacrifice, because once he took the protagonism against the far right, he sacrificed his personal life, not only his life, but he faced a lot of death threats, not only to his life, but also to the life of all other members of his family. So he took a lot of risks. So I really believe that every single person that is not a far right supporter in Brazil has a level of, good memories about the sacrifice that he took for persecuting the far right. So what happens is that there was an event in which there was the far right in Brazil was, in fact, plotting a coup to kill him and to kill a lot of members of the left, and he was able to, under a lot of authoritarian measures, to dismantle this plan. And after the election in which the president lost, the far right president lost, the supporters of the president decided to do the plan, even without any chances of succeeding. So they decided to invade the seat of the Congress, of the judiciary, and of the executive. So after the election in 8th of January, January 8th of 2023, the supporters of the former far right president, they tried to instigate a coup by invading the capital and doing a lot of terrorist acts to try to motivate the military members of the government to maintain the former Brazilian president far right in power. But of course, it didn't work. Not only didn't work, but gave extra powers to Alejandro and showed that Alejandro was right since from the beginning. That this is why he was working so much. So every single excesses of Alejandro seemed justified after the people saw with their own eyes what were the true colors, the true intentions of the far right. That was the full dismantlement of the Brazilian democracy. So with Alejandro Moraes, he became like a superhero of the left, okay, ironically, because he's a very conservative guy. The only thing that he did was trying to preserve his position and his powers and the powers of the lobbies, okay, the economical lobbies that supported Michel Temer, and that, of course, he extended, picking him as Supreme Court justice. So what happens is that since then, he became a very powerful person, and it was not a surprise that he decided not only to use these extra powers, the superpowers that he was using to preserve the Brazilian democracy, to also do other things, okay, illegal things. So we also need to say that while in this story, he also faced a lot of enemies like Elon Musk. Elon Musk decided to enter in a personal battle against Alejandro Moraes, in which he said that Alejandro Moraes would end up in jail for his crimes, and Alejandro Moraes blocked Twitter in Brazil. And in the end of this battle, Alejandro Moraes won. Elon Musk was surrendered to Alejandro Moraes, and he decided to obey Xandão and to pay the fine that Alejandro Moraes wanted. So after that, there was also a struggle after the election of Donald Trump. Donald Trump decided to impose tariffs, unilateral tariffs on Brazil, and to impose the Magnitsky sanctions on Xandão, preventing him to use money. So it was a problem not only to Xandão but to all members of the Supreme Court, because Alejandro de Moraes was seen as somebody who was against human rights, and as Donald Trump and the former Brazilian president are both far right, they helped each other. But Xandão didn't back down. He doubled down in his position, and in the end of the day, the Magnitsky law was overturned, and Xandão was one more battle. So not only he won the battle against the Brazilian far right leader, he won against the richest man in the earth, Elon Musk, and also with the most powerful man in the earth, Donald Trump. So it seemed that Xandão, he won the game, end of the history. No, it was discovered that there was a bank called Bank Master of Brazil, and this bank was bankrupt, and other public banks wanted to buy the bank to save him. And in this process, a lot of the debt of private debt would become public debt. So it was a great case of corruption that would steal billions and billions of dollars from the Brazilian people. And this bank, the bank master, he hired the wife of Alejandro Moraes to help this bank to be bought by a public bank, to save the bank. And they paid a huge sum of money to the bureau, to the office of the wife of Alejandro Moraes, and it was seen as an act of corruption, in which the members of the Supreme Court of Brazil, they were using their wives as a way to, do favors in exchange for money. So a famous case of quid pro quo. and it was publicized. There was a news this week that Alejandro Moraes, they tried to talk with the Secretary of Finances of Brazil, that he showed intentions to favor the bank masters buying by the Brazilian public banks. So now, finally, it seems that the media in Brazil is finally going against Xandão, going against Alexandre de Moraes. So there are some theories what's going on. First of all, after the former Brazilian president, who is a far-right president, is already in jail, Xandão is not useful anymore. So they need to get rid of him. And Xandão, he concentrated too much power, and they need to get rid of him. And one of the ways that they can get rid of him is by assassination. I don't know if this is in the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if that would be the case. The other way is to do character assassination, to associate him with corruption, to isolate him, and to force him to back down from the Supreme Court. Some years ago, it happened with another justice called Barbosa, that was also protagonist of event. He became very popular. Barbosa became very popular. He was the first black Supreme Court justice of Brazil, and after he arrested a lot of politicians, he became extremely popular. But he also generated a lot of problems, and he was forced to step down. And I also think that this can be the best case scenario for Xandão. I don't see any case scenario in which Xandão stay in power for 20 years, being the most powerful man of the Republic. I really think that what we are watching now is that these medias, these legacy medias, these newspapers that are owned by the Brazilian elite members, the billionaires of Brazil associated with the financial markets, they said enough is enough, go back to your place, Xandão, we don't want you here anymore. You saved the Brazilian democracy. Now we want you to go. So I really think that, I don't know if this situation with the master bank is real or not. Probably it is, okay? But probably they will use it to provoke an impeachment of Alejandro, or to force him to step down from the Supreme Court. Knowing how Alejandro operates, he never backs down. He's extremely courageous, has a lot of audacity. So I really think that he'll go until the last circumstances, to preserve his power. And I really think that the only way to take him from the Supreme Court is by a legal process or by assassination. So what we are watching is the beginning of the end for Alejandro Moraes, because I think that as we are watching in the news, that he is being associated with corruption, is because the media of Brazil that is associated with the financial markets, they are already trying to throw him under the bus. So they say, okay, thanks a lot for your services, now we don't need you anymore. So I really think that we will not listen to Alejandro Moraes' names in the next decades. Let's see, but I think I'm right. Until next time.